summer-long study of the Psalms, different Psalms every week. And so today we continue with that. But first, how many of you like to hear a good story? Yeah, I love a good story. I make my living off good stories. I like stories about myself, but even better, I like it when the story is about someone else. Now, nowadays, the kiddos are calling that spilling the tea, which is great for me because I love stories and I really love tea a lot. And there's not a day that goes by where several times a day I'm not leaving my office to run into the office of my work BFF going, "Girl, you won't believe what I just heard. You won't believe what so-and-so just did. I think this is going on and that's going on, and blah, blah, blah." And we don't know if it's true or not. We're just talking about what we think. Well, I was listening to a Christian podcast this week where they were talking about the difference between gossip and discernment. Now, discernment is being able to tell the difference between right and wrong. And so the question was, are we able to discern the stories we're telling, to recognize the ones that aren't so good to tell, and maybe even simply not true at all? So we aren't necessarily lying, right? We just haven't bothered to fact check anything before repeating informations or stories as truth, right? So the psalm I've landed on today in this vein of thought is Psalm 57, and if you'd like to follow along, that would be page 407 in your pew Bibles. This is a Psalm of David. "Have mercy on me, my God, have mercy on me, for in you I take refuge. I will take refuge in the shadow of your wings until the disaster has passed. I cry out to God Most High, to God who vindicates me. He sends from heaven and saves me, rebuking those who hotly pursue me. God sends forth his love and his faithfulness. I am in the midst of lions. I am forced to dwell among ravenous beasts, men whose teeth are spears and arrows, whose tongues are sharp swords. Be exalted, O God, above the heavens, and let your glory be over all the earth. They spread a net for my feet. I was bowed down in distress, and they dug a pit in my path, but they have fallen into it themselves. My heart, O God, is steadfast. My heart is steadfast. I will sing and make music. Awake, my soul. Awake, harp and lyre. I will awaken the dawn. I will praise you, Lord, among the nations. I will sing of you among the peoples. For great is your love, reaching to the heavens. Your faithfulness reaches to the skies. Be exalted, O God, above the heavens, and let your glory be over all the earth." Amen. Now that's a good word, with an all too common lament found within it that remains true for so many of us thousands and thousands of years later. I am in the midst of lions. I am forced to dwell among the ravenous beasts, men whose teeth are spears and arrows and whose tongues are sharp words. David's saying, they're hurting me by what they are saying. I am the subject of gossip, Lord, and it's breaking my heart. Now, you might be thinking, well, everybody tells a story or two now and then. Apparently, you do it all day long. But before you dismiss this to be a problem of overworked teachers or preteen girls, I want to point out that some of the most biting gossip I have ever heard has come from a table of grown men sharing their morning coffee before they head out to their farms and fields. I'm just saying. Just spilling tea? What harm is there in that? Well, do you remember an Olympic skier by the name of Peakaboo Street? Peakaboo, pronounced Peakaboo. She is or was a well-known Olympic gold medalist in the Super G a few years ago. But she is more than a famous skier. In fact, in between training on the slopes and traveling around the world to compete, she managed to get an education and earn a degree in nursing. Early in her nursing career, she worked briefly as an ICU nurse in a large metropolitan hospital. She did outstanding work there, but there was a problem. The head of nursing had to tell her she wasn't allowed to answer the phones anymore in her department because of the confusion that it caused people when they called in, because callers would be connected to the ICU unit and hear her say in her best professional voice, "Peekaboo, I see you." Now, is that a true story? No way. But somebody somewhere told it. And one of you, at least, is going to leave here today and go tell somebody that Peekaboo Street is a nurse. She is not a nurse. She has never been a nurse. And as far as I know, she doesn't particularly want to be a nurse. It's just a rumor. It's a story. It's gossip. Funny? Yes. Harmless? Maybe. Truthful? Not even a little bit. So it seems, though, that we cannot resist the temptation to spread a good story around, whether it is true or not. And do you know when this all began? Do these words sound familiar to you? Did he really say you shouldn't eat the fruit off of that tree? The Bible tells us that the tongue is a fire. It can set an entire forest ablaze. It's dangerous and destructive. Its power is far greater than its size, and it's like a tiny rudder that can guide a huge ship. And we should never underestimate the power of this particular body part. You see, in our Christian faith, we use words like accountability and righteousness sometimes in an attempt to explain why we are always standing around in a puddle of spilled tea. It feels like, as far as our words are concerned, we often lose perspective of our identity in Christ pretty quickly. Because first and foremost, and I hope we are all humble enough to not forget this, our identity is as forgiven sinners. But we pretty quickly seem to forget the log in our own eyes when we can discuss the speck in our neighbors. And this can be and often is devastating to the subjects of our gossip. Now, of course, we know this. We've seen it happen. We've seen it happen to elementary school boys when they're labeled as slow or difficult, and people still think that same thing about them when they are grown. Or to the reputation of a middle school girl when she's said to be too much of a tomboy. Or to the college prospects of a high schooler when they're rumored to have cheated on something. Or to the promotion chances of an employee when they are said to have been so friendly with their superiors in order to get a promotion. It hardly matters whether these stories are true or not. If they get spread, they cause damage. No one can tame the tongue, says James in his book. It is a restless evil full of deadly poison. And there is got a lot of truth to the saying, if you can't say anything good, don't say anything at all. Perhaps we as Christians should take that saying a step further. You can't say anything God, something that reflects a Christ-like attitude and reflects the love of Christ for all of us and through all of us, then we shouldn't say anything at all. There is nothing more hurtful and more discouraging to one of your brothers and sisters than to make an unkind or uncalled for remark about someone's attempt to try to do the right thing for God. That maybe didn't come out perfectly, or maybe was achieved in a way that you wouldn't have chosen, yet it was completed nonetheless. David wrote this psalm when he was in hiding from Saul. Now, Saul is the king of Israel, but he's also he's the father of his very best friend, Jonathan. And Saul is the same king that David would go into his courts and play music for him to comfort him from the debilitating headaches he suffered from. David served Saul in so many ways, and rather than lifting David up as God's chosen leader, Saul is hunting him down to kill him. Now, we may not be hunting folks down with spears and weapons like Saul was, but we are harming people when we gossip about their story, the stories of their past that has been forgiven, or the stories that God is now writing for them. You see, nothing divides a church or a people faster than thoughtlessly spoken words and gossip. God hates gossip. You can look in the Old Testament at the story of Nehemiah in chapter 6, where he is rebuilding the wall around Jerusalem. Now there were 3 men, Sanballat, Tobiah, and Geshem, who were the enemies of the Jews, and they were making several attempts to try to stop Nehemiah from rebuilding the walls of Jerusalem. Why? Because at that time, a city without walls around it was susceptible to attack and invasion. So, Sanballat and Tobiah are very upset to hear that Nehemiah is working on this wall. When they heard about it, they were disturbed that someone had taken an interest and come to promote the welfare of the Israelites. Up until this time, the Israelites had been off on their own. Whatever happened to them happened to them. No one in charge seemed to really be worrying about them. But then comes Nehemiah with this vision from the Lord that he is to rebuild the walls around Jerusalem. So they go to him and they mock Nehemiah and they say, "What are you doing? Are you rebelling against the king?" And all the time that construction is taking place, their anger grows and grows. And when they see that the wall is continuing to be built and being built very quickly, Sanballat especially becomes very angry, and he ridicules the Jews. And they try to distract him. They try to distract Nehemiah from what God has in store for him. And they tell him, they don't tell him to tear the wall down. They don't tell him to quit building the wall. What they try to do is distract them by other things. "We want you to come and meet with us so we can talk about you building the wall. We can have a meeting about the way you're building the wall." See, they hope to remove Nehemiah from the protection of the city and the soldiers that he has brought with him so they could harm him. If they cut his head off, he's probably not going to be able to finish building the wall. But Nehemiah could not be dissuaded from his task. Nehemiah refused to get off the wall. "I'm staying on the wall. I'm not going to be distracted from the work that God has laid out for me." So, Sanballat attempts something different. It's called gossip. Even those thousands and thousands of years ago, he hopes to discourage the builders and get them to turn against Nehemiah. So what he does is he sends an open letter to the Israelites. He doesn't send a letter just to Nehemiah because that would have no effect. Nehemiah would just say, "Sorry, I'm busy building the wall." And that would be the end of it. He sends an open letter. And in those days, if you wanted to get information out to people, you sent a letter to where they were. You had it read at the gates of the city for all the men to hear. And then whatever was in the letter, the men went home and told the women told the children. That's how you got information out, right? Not unlike being at a table with a coffee cup in front of you in a restaurant, right? It's the gate of our community. Anyways, Sanballat sends this open letter accusing Nehemiah of all kinds of things that weren't true. He's hoping that Nehemiah will be so distressed by this gossip that he will choose to defend himself and his character rather than finishing the work that the Lord has placed in front of him. But his hope of getting the people all riled up so they will turn against Nehemiah with his gossip backfires. Actually, the people commit to their work. They finish the wall in 53 days. Nehemiah does not listen to the gossip, nor does he get distracted from who he knows God knows him to be or the plans that God has from him. Check out those Old Testament stories, ladies and gentlemen. They're pretty fascinating. Nehemiah is stuck in the middle of some hard stuff, so look for him. Anyways, good book. So listen to the words of the God that he has specifically concerning his church in Ecclesiastes. Guard your steps when you go to the house of God. Go near to listen rather than to offer the sacrifice of fools who do not know that they do wrong. Don't be quick with your mouth. Do not be hasty in your heart to utter anything before God. God is in heaven and you are on earth, so let your words be few. Do you know how to stop the spread of a rumor? Just don't repeat it. Don't respond. Surround yourself with people who will fight for you in rooms that you are not in. Let me say that again, because it's profound. You need to surround yourself with people who will fight for you in rooms that you are not in. Proverbs 26:20 says, "Without wood, a fire goes out. Without gossip, a quarrel dies down." So how do you know if something is gossip or not? Here's 4 things I have come up with. 1, would you repeat the story to Jesus himself if he was standing in front of you? The answer is no. Probably shouldn't say it. Number 2, any conversation you have to start with, "You didn't hear this from me," or "Did you hear about," is probably a conversation you should not be having. Number 3, check your sources. Where's your information coming from? And is it godly? And is it truthful? That podcast I mentioned to you at the beginning of our time together this morning, they told a story about something had gone on with another church leader who was rather well known, and they were making comments about it to another church leader. Like, there's a lot of people that walk around and speak about Jesus all over in big things, big places, and they kind of apparently talk about each other. Who knew? Not surprised, a little disappointed, not surprised. But anyways, something has happened to one of these people, and this person is responding to it to a third party, and they're making all these comments about this person and these things that have happened, and can't believe it, and did you hear, and blah, 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 and they stopped them and said, "Hold up. Have you ever been to their church?" "Well, no." "Have you ever met them?" "No." "Have you ever even talked to them?" "No." "Well, I have. They're a friend of mine, and they're not at all like what you're describing. Where did you get your information at?" Are you ready for this? People magazine. We laugh, but how often do we do that? People magazine. Hear me when I say this to you folks, especially in an election year. The media doesn't always tell us the truth. They lie to us. Why? Because gossip, especially about bad things, sells. And 2, because they can get away with it. Because they know we aren't going to check the validity of what they're telling us. We're just going to repeat it. That is how we began our journeys as humans, believing the world is flat. I don't know what's beyond the horizon, but I think it's a giant dragon that will swallow you if you go beyond the sunset. That's also the same way hundreds of people lost their lives in the Salem witch trials. "Well, I don't understand what they're doing, and since I don't understand it, they must be a witch, so burn them all." That's the history of gossip, folks. There simply isn't anything good about gossip, and often when we don't know, we just make something up so we can tell a story. Here's my 4th thing for us to consider when we're deciding if something's true. Go and ask. Go and ask. "Hey, I heard that this is going on. Can you tell me more about that? Do you want to tell me more about that? How can I help you with that?" Get the truth from the source. Most of the time, people are happy to tell you what's really going on in their lives if you just ask with a pure heart. Because here's the thing we need to remember. When you spill tea, it stains stuff. And those stains don't come out very easily. In fact, there's a whole industry of people who create fabric by staining it with tea. There's a great Christian virtue in simply holding your tongue. Dietrich Bonhoeffer, the German Christian martyr of the Second World War, believed that there was a special ministry to be performed in holding one's tongue. He said, "Often we combat our evil thoughts most effectively if we refuse to allow them to be expressed in words." This great spiritual awakening begins with a simple step, and that is keeping our mouths shut. Paul implores Timothy to avoid godless chatter because those who indulge in it will become more and more ungodly. That's kind of tough stuff, isn't it? The tongue can do great harm, but it could also do great good. James says in his book, "With it we bless the Lord and Father, and with it we curse those who are made in the likeness of God. From the same mouth comes a blessing and a curse." With our words, we can curse our brothers and sisters, we can discourage them, weaken them, and break them down, or we can praise God. We can bless people, encourage them, and strengthen them, and help build them up. There are few ministries more important than a ministry of encouragement and exhortation. Rita read the psalm this morning from Psalm 20, and it says in there, "May the Lord answer you when you are in distress. May the name of the God of Jacob protect you. May he send you help from the sanctuary and grant you support from Zion. May he remember all your sacrifices and accept your burnt offerings. May he give you the desire of your heart and make all your plans succeed." Here it is. "May we shout for joy over your victories and lift up our banners in the name of our God." You can raise a banner of praise over other people with your words. You know, it can be hard because the world is hard. Crime is up, stocks are down, grocery prices are climbing, the weather we're worried about, the air isn't so great, we've got health concerns, your boss blames you for stuff, your coworkers resent you, your dog bites you, your spouse is glaring at you, the kids are whining about something. And some of the most discouraging words we hear sometimes sneak up on us when we turn on the TV or we pick up a newspaper or a magazine and we see all the headlines of those trashy tabloids. There isn't any good news gossip on those pages because what sells those things is bad news, hence the rumors and the innuendo. Gossip is almost by definition negative and disheartening. We want to hear about divorces. We want to hear about death and disease and disasters and disappointments because sometimes it makes us feel a little bit better about ourselves and the journey we're walking. We don't gossip about good things. But what if we did? In the face of all this gloom and doom, what if we claimed a spirit of exhortation and refused to utter a discouraging word? What if we waved banners of God's truth over each other instead? We all need encouragers in our lives, and we must all serve as encouragers for other people. Imagine what we might hear if we devoted ourselves to listening for and passing along only the good gossip. Hey, did you hear that Katie Linville's going to Ball State? And I know she's going to have the best year ever. She's the best Cardinal they've ever had. Chirp, chirp. What if we waved that banner over her? Think about whatever banner you want to wave over yourself, or whatever banner you can wave over your neighbor that gets on your nerves, or that coworker. Girl, did you hear what Elizabeth did this time? Man, she got all her paperwork turned on in a time, and I know she's on track to do it again next month. Banners. Banners of good gossip. Contrary to popular pessimism, no news is not good news. Good news is good news. And if we don't spread good news around, who is going to do it? When we're encouraged, then we are enabled to pass along encouragement to other people, and we fill them up. But someone's got to get that ball rolling, because the world is not going to do it. Can you think of someone who has used words to encourage you or to protect you in a room that you weren't in? How loved and valuable did that make you feel? How could you make others feel that way? How are you making others feel? Now, most of us have grown so careful of protecting ourselves from the bad news that bombards us daily that our antennae aren't really tuned in to receive any good news or even register an odd bit of good news that does float our way. If someone gives us a compliment or something, generally we look at them and say, "What do you want?" So the next time a good word about someone passes you by, why not latch onto it and pass it on to that individual? "I heard you're doing good things over there. Good for you. Well done." What if Christians, what if this church specifically was known as the people who surprise other people with good news, good gossip? "Hey, did you hear about what they're doing over at the school? Isn't that amazing? Did you hear about what that cashier at the marathon station did for me last week? Well, let me tell you about it." Now, another form of Christian encouragement can be prayer. There are no bigger or better words to hear than "I am praying for you," because the lift that gives lasts for days. And it is part of the encouragement that Paul offers to Philemon. Even as he thanks him for the encouragement that Philemon gave to him, it comes in the word of prayer. Paul intentionally reveals to Philemon that he is praying for him. "I pray for you." And that's important. Something that Jody's hoping to do for this church family, that we can come together and we can pray for one another. That we can take the good news and the concerns we have there and we can take them directly to Papa, to God. So look at what they're doing down here, God. Look at what your kids are up to today. They're amazing. But sometimes we need his help, right? So offering encouragement through prayer gives comfort, and it makes that Christian love we have tangible in the lives of our brothers and sisters. But filling people up, getting people overflowing with Jesus, it's another grace that results from encouragement. Genuine, heartfelt encouragement is one of the greatest confidence builders that we know. There's a story told that when Werner von Braun was heading up the Marshall Space Flight Center, he would receive letters from all over the world. This is true, by the way. This is not a story. From all over the world. He had a number of secretaries then because they didn't have emails, and, so secretaries would answer letters and send them out. So he would receive letters from all over the world, and he had a number of secretaries who would compose standard replies to the amounts of mail he got in. And sometimes he would scribble a few words in the margins of the form letters. But on one occasion, a college student wrote to him asking him about the future of spaceflight. And the secretary sent back a cautious and formal reply, pointing out the risk of space, the boredom, the uncertainties of what was at that time a new field, and suggesting that student might want to consider alternatives in his education. But von Braun scratched through all of that cautious reply and scribbled out onto the side, "Come with us, we're going to go to the moon." So here's something to think about. Listen to these words of Jesus as well. "The good man brings good things out of the good stored up in his heart. The evil man brings evil things out of the evil stored up in his heart. For out of the overflow of his heart, his mouth speaks." That is from Luke chapter 6. So are you one of the encouragers in our congregation? Are you the one who gives people the courage to dream, to go on, to wave a banner over them, to tell them they can go anywhere, even to the moon? Beware of spilling tea. Share truth instead. Did you like that first song we sang this morning? I love it. I listen to it every morning. It gets me going, gets me popped up. What do you think about the singer? Any thoughts about him? He has a good day every day. Any generalizations you automatically made about his type of music or anything? Yeah. Well, we'll sing it again next week. How's that, Pam? Yeah. So that type of music we generally associate with people who have a different skin color than we do. Rap music, things like that. And then we might make assumptions about that as perhaps how he grew up. Maybe he's been in trouble. What does he do? He's just an artist, blah, blah, blah. I'd like for you to look at this picture. That is Forrest Frank. That is the man who sang the song that we listened to first this morning. He looks like a very young Stephen Curtis Chapman, pretty vanilla, not very exciting looking. He even has on a beige sweater, for heaven's sakes. That young man there is 28 years old. He's a graduate in business management from Baylor University. He works in an office, or he did until he became famous doing these things. He's co-written a song with Elton John. He and his writing partner also wrote the walk-up song for the Texas A&M football team. He's probably not what you were thinking he was. He has a wife named Grace and a son named Bodie. And that's the truth of Forrest Frank. He's probably not at all like what you envisioned him to be. So this is Forrest Frank. Don't make assumptions. Investigate the truth. Validify the truth. Verify the truth. Repeat only the truth. We call it the gospel truth for a reason. Jesus says he is the way, the truth, and the life. He's not a story. It's the truth. Repeat only the truth. Repeat only God's truth. Plant only kindness. Keep your tea in your cups. And if anything does spill out, may it only be Jesus. We're going to sing a song now that is by Third Day, and it is written based on Psalm 57. So, stand up. The words will be on the screen. They are not in your hymnals, but this should be a familiar song to you in some way.